What if I told you that the absolute biggest misconception about becoming a millionaire actually has nothing to do with hitting $1 million? For decades, we've been fed this Hollywood idea of wealth building, right? We obsess over that shiny 7-figure finish line. But here's the thing, focusing on the $1 million mark is a massive distraction from the real milestone that actually dictates your financial destiny.
And that milestone is $100,000. Honestly, the hardest, most grueling part of building wealth isn't making your first million. It's actually dragging yourself across the threshold of your first $100,000. Once you hit that specific kind of magical number, the entire game shifts. But getting there? Well, that requires a completely different mindset. It takes an immense amount of upfront heavy lifting that catches most people totally off guard.
Okay, let's dive into this. The myth so many of us buy into is that making your first million is this ultimate, near impossible hurdle. We put it on a massive pedestal. But the reality? Making your first 100 grand is the true test of your financial endurance. Because once you cross this specific financial reality, your money actually begins to work harder than you do. It starts earning its own keep. But to get to that tipping point, we first have to look deeply at what's holding most people back from ever getting started.
Which brings us to the financial hamster wheel.
This is the incredibly frustrating reality for millions of Americans right now. They're working 40 hours a week, sometimes 60, maybe even grinding through 2 jobs, yet they see absolutely no change in their bank accounts month after month. Why? Because the exact moment the paycheck arrives, it is immediately devoured. Rent, mortgage, insurance, groceries, car payments, streaming subscriptions, weekend spending. Bam! Before you can even blink, the money's just gone, evaporating into thin air, and you're left waiting for the next payday just so the whole exhausting cycle can repeat itself all over again.
This creates what we call the financial hamster wheel. It's that endless cycle of earning money and immediately spending it, instead of putting it to work to build actual assets. And the core struggle here isn't always a low income. You can make a fantastic high-earning salary and still be stuck running on this wheel until the day you retire. The real problem is psychological and systemic. This endless loop prevents you from building actual, tangible assets that grow independently of your daily labor.
See, we often mistakenly think earning wealth is measured by income. If you have a high salary, you must be wealthy, right? Not necessarily. True, lasting wealth is keeping wealth. It's measured by your assets and compound growth over a long period of time. True wealth is not measured by how much you earn, but by how much you keep and how hard that money works for you behind the scenes while you sleep, travel, or just spend time with your family.
Now, let's talk about the power of momentum. So, how do we break out of this cycle and reach that 6-figure mark? Well, think of it this way. Building wealth is like pushing a giant boulder up a steep hill. And this brilliantly illustrates the journey, because at first it barely moves. Every single step feels incredibly difficult. Every single dollar you save might feel totally insignificant against the heavy weight of your goals. You're putting in maximum effort for minimum visible reward. The initial effort requires immense patience and relentless discipline before the momentum finally takes over.
But then, the magic happens. After you cross that first $100,000, compound growth steps in to do the heavy lifting. Your investments start generating returns, and those returns generate even more returns. You are no longer pushing the boulder uphill, gravity has taken over. Year after year, your money is creating more money, acting as an invisible force, pushing that massive boulder down the hill for you, accelerating your net worth without requiring any extra hours at the office. So let's look at step 1, pay your future first.
How do we reach that point of momentum faster? With some highly actionable strategies. Look, the absolute failing method of managing money is paying everyone else first. The landlord, the bank, the credit card company, the utilities, and then just hoping to save whatever is left over. Spoiler alert, usually, absolutely nothing remains. Human nature dictates we spend what we see in our accounts. But the financially successful habit reverses the process entirely. You pay your future self first by automatically moving money into investments before anyone else gets a single dime. Here is how you build a rock-solid system to ensure this happens seamlessly. Step 1. Your paycheck arrives. Step 2. An automatic transfer moves a set amount directly into your investments. Step 3. You spend what is left over. Walking through this system, you can see how moving your money before you even have the chance to touch it guarantees that your wealth actually grows month over month. You are essentially hiding your wealth from your own spending habits. Automation removes emotion, and systems build wealth. So the crucial point is that successful investors just don't rely on motivation. They know motivation is completely fleeting. They don't wake up hoping they'll feel disciplined enough to save money today. Instead, they rely entirely on automated systems that do the work for them, flawlessly every single time, whether they feel like it or not. By removing the daily decision-making process, you completely remove the possibility of self-sabotage. Moving on to step 2, the 24-hour rule. Once you have your automatic investment system in place, we need to rigorously protect those funds. So let me ask you this directly. Do you want to buy something expensive right now? When that sudden urge hits, what do you usually do? It's time to deeply evaluate your own immediate emotional spending habits right in that exact moment. Because that instantaneous spark of desire is exactly where budgets usually go to die. Here is how you defeat that urge. At 0 hours, right when you see the item in the store or online, your emotion is incredibly high. You feel like you absolutely have to have it right now. But force a waiting period, walk away. By 12 hours in, that initial dopamine rush starts to fade. And by 24 hours, logic returns. This forced waiting period causes the impulse to disappear and usually prevents the purchase entirely. It leaves your money safely in your account to compound instead of gathering dust in a closet. Because here is the hard truth. Wealth is rarely destroyed by one massive mistake. It is destroyed by hundreds of tiny emotional purchases. Small, unnecessary decisions, repeated consistently over time, will destroy your financial future much faster than a single bad stock pick ever could. A random sale, an extra dinner out, an impulsive upgrade, if you control your spending in those micro moments, you control the entire trajectory of your financial future.
Let's wrap this up with how to control your financial future.
Through this explainer, we've seen that paying yourself first builds an unbreakable foundation, and mastering your emotional spending protects it. These two systems, working in harmony, will dramatically accelerate your journey to that crucial six-figure milestone. So I want to leave you with this. Are you working for your paycheck, or are you working alongside your investments? Think deeply about that. Once you implement these systems and cross that $100,000 threshold, you are no longer doing all the heavy lifting alone. Your money is working right there with you. Take control, automate your habits, step off that hamster wheel, and let your momentum begin today.
All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're breaking down the exact frameworks that separate people who constantly lose sleep over money from the folks who just methodically build it. We're looking straight at the actionable, systemic steps from the architecture of wealth. Now, just to be super clear right out of the gate, this is not about getting rich quick, and it's definitely not some secret trading algorithm. This is all about the pure mechanics of financial growth. We're going to look at how wealth is actually constructed, brick by brick, system by system, so we can completely remove the anxiety that usually surrounds personal finance.
We're following a really clear blueprint today. We'll cover the 24/7 financial employee, why you need to stop chasing hot stocks, how to increase your earning power, choosing systems over motivation, and finally, making that wealth mindset shift.
All right, section 1, the 24/7 financial employee, or how to make compound interest work for you.
You've probably heard that Albert Einstein called compound interest the most powerful force in finance. And honestly, whether he actually said it or it's just a great historical myth, it hits the nail right on the head. Compound interest is literally the invisible gravity of wealth. It's the absolute core engine that takes these small, seemingly insignificant efforts and turns them into massive, life-changing results over a long enough timeline. Without understanding this force, building wealth feels kind of like trying to run up a down escalator. It's just exhausting.
Think about it like this. Successful wealth builders treat compound growth like an employee, but not just any employee. Imagine hiring someone who works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never asks for a raise, never takes a sick day, and definitely doesn't complain about the commute. They just keep clocking in every single hour, even while you're fast asleep. That is exactly what compound growth does to your capital. Every single dollar you put to work becomes this autonomous little worker, dedicated entirely to building your financial empire.
So how does this actually work in practice? Well, first, you invest your money. Simple enough. Then, the real magic happens. Those earnings start generating their own money. It's capital creating capital. Now, let's be real for a second. At the very beginning, it's agonizingly slow. You'll check your account and barely see a difference. And honestly, this is exactly where most people just give up. But if you hold on, growth accelerates. The curve inevitably steepens. Your portfolio suddenly takes off, not because you're starving yourself to aggressively save, but because your money has taken on a life of its own.
The biggest takeaway here, you absolutely do not need a mountain of capital to start. Time is the ultimate multiplier. Giving that 24/7 employee more hours on the clock is everything. Starting early is so much more valuable than starting big. Getting going today with a tiny amount is mathematically, undeniably, far better than waiting a decade to drop in a massive lump sum. Waiting around for the perfect time or the perfect salary is just the enemy of compounding.
Moving right along to section 2, stop chasing hot stocks, because we really need to prioritize consistency over speculation.
Look, every single year, the market is going to promise you a new shiny object, a hot tech stock, a guaranteed crypto coin, whatever's trending on social media. And millions of people rush in, driven by pure FOMO, fear of missing out. The speculator checks their phone 50 times a day, their stress is through the roof, and frankly, while a few get insanely lucky, the vast majority lose their shirts. Meanwhile, actual successful investors are doing something totally different. They are incredibly boring. They buy into broad market index funds. They make steady contributions, completely ignoring the noise, the hype, and the panic, creating real stability.
Because trying to predict tomorrow's winner doesn't actually build wealth. It just gives you an ulcer. The goal isn't to beat everyone else. The goal is to consistently build wealth. When you let go of that ego-driven need to outsmart the market and focus entirely on your own long-term stability, investing stops feeling like a wild night at a casino and starts feeling like a predictable, calming certainty.
Okay, section 3, increase your earning power. Because we need to look way beyond just saving.
While keeping your spending in check is obviously important, there's a brutal mathematical truth about saving. It has a hard floor. You can only cut your expenses down so far before you're just miserable. Skipping a daily coffee might save you a few bucks, with strict limits on how much that moves the needle. But increasing your income, there's almost no limit there. Learning new skills can increase your income by thousands of dollars, instantly pouring massive fuel onto your investment fire. And the pathways to doing this are practically endless today. Think about these income accelerators: learning AI, starting a side business, jumping into freelancing or consulting, selling digital products, or creating content. Successful wealth builders absolutely refuse to just budget their way to wealth. They step up and actively architect entirely new streams of revenue. So here's a question for you. How can I earn $100 more this week? You have to stop asking how you can pinch pennies and start asking that question instead. It's a total paradigm shift. It flips your brain from a defensive posture of restriction into an offensive, creative posture of growth. It literally forces you to look at your skills and your time as leverageable assets.
And that offensive mindset is exactly what you need to accelerate toward your first $100,000. Charlie Munger famously said that getting to the first 100,000 is a tough slog, but you just have to do it. Every extra dollar you earn and invest becomes another soldier in your compounding army, pushing you exponentially closer to that critical six-figure mark where the math truly starts to snowball.
Now, that earning mindset is useless without execution, which brings us to section 4, systems over motivation and automating your wealth. Let's be brutally honest for a second. Motivation comes and goes. Relying on financial excitement is a total trap. Some days you wake up ready to conquer the world, and other days you're exhausted and just want to impulse buy stuff you don't need. That's just being human. But true builders know that systems continue working even when life gets busy. They build rigid, unbreakable systems that take temporary feelings entirely out of the equation.
You make success predictable by removing yourself as the bottleneck. We're talking about core wealth systems here. Automatic investing, so the cash leaves your account before you can even spend it. Automatic savings, automatic bill payments to kill late fees dead, and scheduling monthly financial reviews. When the heavy lifting happens automatically in the background, life can get crazy, work can get stressful, and you will still stay on track.
Which brings us to our final section, section 5, the wealth mindset shift, the final bridge. When you pull all this together into the complete blueprint, the results are incredible. 1. Hire your compound interest employee immediately. 2. Invest consistently in broad markets. 3. Focus relentlessly on increasing your earning power. And 4. Automate your financial systems. These small, disciplined actions repeated systematically over time generate massive, inevitable long-term success. So I'll leave you with this. Hitting 100K isn't just about money, it's about mindset. It requires abandoning the fantasy of overnight success and fully embracing the quiet power of disciplined, automated action. Are you ready to stop dreaming about wealth and systematically build it? Because building wealth ultimately separates the dreamers from the actual builders. Take a hard look at your daily habits and your systems. Which one are you going to be?
we call the Millionaire Blueprint. See, from day one, we're taught that simply making money is the whole journey, right? We hustle, we grind, we chase that promotion or that big payout, thinking that the absolute second we hit a certain magic number in our bank account, we've crossed the finish line. But the reality, building wealth is actually only half of the journey. And honestly, if you don't know how to navigate the second half, the first half doesn't matter at all.
So you have to ask yourself, why does financial progress suddenly disappear? It's a tragic story we hear all too often. Someone builds up a great nest egg, they're feeling super secure, and then poof, it's just gone. Keeping wealth, not just making it, is actually what creates true millionaires. We really need to raise the stakes here and understand that your financial progress is literally always under threat if you aren't actively defending it. Earning the money, well, that gets you on the field. But keeping it is how you actually win the game.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, Protect Wealth Like the Wealthy.
Because look, there are looming, everyday threats out there that can fundamentally derail your life. We're talking about unexpected emergencies. Maybe it's a sudden medical bill that your insurance doesn't quite cover. Maybe it's a sudden job loss in a shifting economy, or a business slowdown that suddenly cuts your income in half for 6 months. These aren't extreme 1-in-a-million black swan events. These are just normal parts of the human experience. But without preparation, these everyday occurrences can tragically wipe out years of disciplined financial progress in a matter of months.
So what's the countermeasure? Well, financially successful people deploy preparation long before the problems actually arrive. This is the defensive, stoic strategy of the wealthy. They build robust emergency funds, meaning a sudden expense is just an inconvenience, not a full-blown catastrophe. They diversify their investments so a hit to one sector doesn't completely wipe them out. They religiously avoid unnecessary debt that can drag them down when cash flow gets tight. And crucially, they never ever risk everything on one single opportunity. Basically, they build the moat before the invading army even shows up.
There's this saying, protecting wealth isn't fear, it's wisdom. I really want that to sink in for a second. Sometimes people view defensive financial strategies as being pessimistic or scared, but that's not it at all. Markets are going to rise and markets are going to fall. The economy is always going to change. Disciplined investors stay incredibly focused through those rising and falling markets because their protection is rooted in deep wisdom, not panic. They don't have to operate out of fear simply because they've already done the wise work at protecting their assets.
Which brings us to Section 2, Thinking in Decades, Not Days.
You know, the average person is completely consumed by the anxiety of the 24-hour news cycle. They are agonizing over today's headlines, today's stock price, what the market is doing this exact afternoon. It is exhausting. But the millionaire, they ask one simple, totally different question. Where will this investment be 10 years from now? That single shift in questioning separates millionaires from almost everyone else. It literally changes the entire game from a frantic sprint into a calculated marathon.
Because here's the secret. Long-term thinking removes panic, it removes emotion, and it removes a ton of unnecessary decisions. When markets decline, most people panic because they're thinking about tomorrow. But millionaires, they see an opportunity because they're thinking about a decade from now. When headlines predict fear and doom, the wealthy remain patient. By zooming out, they protect themselves from their own worst impulses and completely bypass that emotional roller coaster that bankrupts the average investor. We have got to stop building wealth for just next month. History repeatedly shows us that disciplined investors benefit from massive long-term economic growth. When you visualize a 30-year trajectory looking from year 1 all the way to year 30, that extended time horizon is where compound interest actually has the runway to do its magic. That is how true financial independence is created, not in days, not in months, but across decades.
Let's move on to Section 3, Building a Millionaire Identity.
Listen, if you fundamentally believe that money always just disappears, you are going to spend it as fast as you get it. If you believe wealth is impossible for you, you're just going to stop trying. It becomes a total self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you adopt investor beliefs and start asking, what investment will improve my future instead of just what can I afford today, your decisions begin changing immediately. You shift from being a passive consumer of your present to an active architect of your future. And that is incredibly powerful.
This brings us to what we call the wealth chain reaction. Becoming a millionaire actually starts internally. Your identity shapes your daily behavior. That behavior, repeated over time, forms your habits. And finally, those deeply ingrained habits ultimately shape your wealth. You literally cannot skip straight to the end. You have to build the identity first.
In fact, long before someone actually becomes a millionaire, they develop what I like to call premature millionaire habits. We're talking about discipline, patience, a relentless desire for learning, taking extreme ownership of their circumstances, and above all, consistency. These are the quiet foundational traits that people internalize well before their bank account ever hits $1 million. They become millionaires in their character first, and the math just kind of catches up to them later.
And that leads us perfectly into Section 4, the power of ordinary habits.
True wealth building relies on some completely unflashy habits. Investing every single month regardless of what the market is doing. Actively avoiding those emotional financial decisions. Consistently living below your means. And crucially, increasing your investments as your income grows, rather than just inflating your lifestyle. None of this is going to make the front page of a newspaper, but these specific ordinary actions repeated over 20 or 30 years build absolute fortunes.
Honestly, the most empowering reality of all is that extraordinary wealth is usually the result of ordinary habits repeated consistently. You do not need a genius IQ to build wealth. You don't need to perfectly time the stock market, and you don't need to invent the next massive tech startup. Massive financial success does not require perfection. It merely requires persistence. It requires showing up and doing the ordinary, unsexy things day in and day out until the extraordinary results actually materialize.
So, to quickly summarize the core millionaire principles: protect your money just as fiercely as you earn it, think in decades to completely remove panic, and build your millionaire identity first through quiet, consistent discipline.
Because at the end of the day, financial independence is just the beginning of living life on your own terms. All of this discipline, all of this long-term thinking, it isn't the end goal, it's the gateway to true freedom. So let me leave you with this. If you started adopting these ordinary habits today, what kind of extraordinary life could you be living a decade from now? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this sparks a massive change in your own financial journey. Catch you next time.
Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're digging into some source material that breaks down something absolutely huge, the actual blueprint for financial freedom. Seriously, it's a game changer. To kick things off, I want you to visualize a moment with me. Just one quiet, incredible moment that represents years of hard work.
Picture this. It's just a totally ordinary morning, right? You wake up, the house is completely quiet, you grab your coffee, sit down, and unlock your phone. You tap the screen, and you slowly open up your investment app. The little logo spins for a second, and there, right in the center of your screen, staring back at you, is one number.
$1 million. Just let that sink in for a second. For a moment, everything goes completely quiet. And it's not because you magically got rich overnight, you know? There was no winning lottery ticket here, no crazy inheritance from a long-lost uncle. It's quiet because in that exact moment, the reality actually hits you. According to the blueprint we're unpacking today, that number is so much more than just money. It is undeniable, hard proof that patience actually works. It's proof that your discipline paid off. It's basically the ultimate validation that yes, ordinary people absolutely can achieve extraordinary financial success.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the massive paradigm shift it brings, one that, sadly, a lot of folks don't figure out until it's way too late. The research in our source material highlights a crucial truth. Real wealth, it's not actually about owning a bunch of stuff. It is all about owning your time.
Think about the contrast here. On one hand, you've got the endless treadmill of chasing material status. You know, the luxury cars, the latest designer clothes, the massive houses. But on the other hand, you have what true wealth actually gives you. Time. Time to travel. Time to be 100% present with your family. Time to finally start that passion project you've been putting off. And maybe the best part? Waking up every single day without that awful knot in your stomach worrying about how you're going to pay the bills. The data hits the nail on the head. Money itself doesn't buy happiness, but financial freedom, that buys you choices. And having choices creates a life that actually feels free. That's the real goal here. Not luxury, freedom.
Section 1. The Millionaire Blueprint. Okay, let's dive right into this. The source material outlines 9 distinct habits, but they essentially boil down to a few core pillars. First, you buy assets, not status. Second, you respect your time way more than your money. And third, you think in decades and let compound growth do the heavy lifting for you. Now, I know these sound super simple at first glance, but honestly, when you repeat these habits month after month, year after year, they build this unstoppable momentum. They become literally life-changing. And speaking of thinking in decades rather than days, seeing a 30-year timeline really drives us home. You can actually visualize how compound growth starts out as this slow rumble, and then eventually it just skyrockets.
A surprisingly small amount invested consistently early on will multiply exponentially by year 30. Just to put that into perspective, say you invest $300 a month. Over 30 years, you're putting in roughly $100,000 out of pocket, right? But compound interest, it can turn that $100,000 into well over $500,000. You see, you don't build lasting wealth over a long weekend. You build it by setting up a solid system and letting time do the work over a 10, 20, or 30-year horizon.
So, I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Seriously, try it. Imagine yourself exactly 30 years from today. Picture your future self standing right in front of you, looking back at the person you are right at this very moment. When you look at the choices in front of you today, ask yourself, is that future version of you going to say thank you for choosing long-term freedom over some quick short-term pleasure? Or are they going to look at you and ask why on earth you kept putting it off, just assuming you always had more time? Because here's the absolute truth. Your future is being created right now, in this exact moment. Financial independence is never an accident, and it sure doesn't happen because of one incredibly lucky year. It's built on thousands of totally ordinary choices. One investment, one habit, one paycheck, just repeated again and again. Every single investment you make is, quite literally, a message you're sending to the person you are going to become tomorrow. So, the really crucial takeaway from all this is that you do not need a perfect salary to make this happen. You definitely don't need perfect market timing, and you absolutely don't need some scheme to get rich overnight. You really just need 3 simple things. Step 1, a plan. Step 2, the discipline to actually follow that plan, especially when it gets boring or tough. And step 3, the patience to just wait. You need the patience to let time do what it does best. Because at the end of the day, time is the absolute greatest investor you will ever have on your team. Time takes those small, ordinary decisions and works its magic to multiply them into something completely extraordinary. If the insights from today's explainer has shifted how you look at money, please do not let it end here. I really want you to take action today, like right now. Review your finances. Start investing if you haven't started yet. If you are already investing, see if you can bump up that monthly contribution, even just a little bit. Or honestly, just grab a pen and physically write down your first $1 million goal. Small actions taken today are what create those extraordinary futures.
So, I'm going to leave you with a question to chew on, and I really want you to answer this for yourself. What is your biggest financial goal? Are you aiming for that first $100,000? Is it hitting the $1 million mark? Or is it just achieving complete, unshakable financial freedom? Take a moment and define it. Because every great fortune, every life-changing shift, it all starts with just one decision. Your journey to financial freedom starts today.